Every now and again, there's a story that just blows my mind so much that I'm like, what world am I actually living in? So there is this guy, his name is Hugo Carvajal, and he's a former Venezuelan general who has pled guilty to a bunch of stuff, narco-terrorism, weapons, and drug trafficking charges. And he's basically spilling the tea on what Venezuela under Nicolas Maduro, who's the illegitimate leader of Venezuela, has been doing with respect to the United States, and actually involving many countries in basically a conspiracy against the United States. He was the former spy chief for Nicolas Maduro. Here he is with Maduro in Venezuela. But he was also the former spy chief for Hugo Chavez, the guy who came before Nicolas Maduro. Here he is with Hugo Chavez. And I mean, this story is just breaking right as the U.S. is launching these military operations, putting pressure across Latin America to get people like Maduro out of office. And of course, mainstream media is like, oh, these are illegal boat strikes. But I'm going to show you how Venezuela was basically this hub for international narco-terrorism, drug laundering, targeting the United States. And it's coming out right now because this guy was one of the members of this Cartel of the Suns. And this is a really different type of basically drug cartel because it essentially is the Venezuelan government. The reason they call it the Cartel of the Suns, I learned, is because these things are the actual stars on the generals of the Venezuelan army's shoulders to indicate that they're a general. So the Cartel of the Suns, it literally means the cartel of the Venezuelan generals. And so as part of this guy, Hugo Carvajal, they called him El Pollo, the chicken. As part of his basically guilty plea, he is writing a letter that asserts what he knows about what Venezuela in the Cartel of the Suns has been doing. And honestly, it is just outrageous. So in this letter that he's published and signed, he said literally that the purpose of the Cartel of the Suns is to weaponize drugs against the United States. So as an example, it's just crazy. He talks about this 5.6 ton shipment of cocaine that was transported from Venezuela to Mexico, which is going to come back here in a second, in the 2000s. And just remember that this lady, who is the current president of Mexico, is basically standing with Venezuela, saying there's no evidence that Maduro is linked to drugs. All right, well, this shipment of 5.5 tons of cocaine that went to Mexico left the main airport in Caracas. So like, this is the equivalent of the plane leaving JFK Airport in New York City. And the pilot said that the National Guard supervised the loading and departure of the plane. The Venezuelan government deactivated radars so that they could allow for ghost flights, and they actually used their Navy to provide maritime escort for the drug boats and drug submarines that Trump is now targeting. And honestly, as I was doing research for this, I'm just thinking to myself, like, why doesn't the media report just the facts that they know about? I mean, you could argue both sides, fine, but you look at the way they cover this. Oh, it's just alleged drug boats. It's an alleged drug vessel. That's what CNN says. Oh, it's an alleged narco sub. It could have just been regular people that have a little submarine out in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, not what the spy chief is telling us now. He said that this was a plan suggested by the Cubans to Chavez in the mid-2000s, and it was successfully executed with FARC, which is a Colombian group, Cuban operatives, and Hezbollah, which we're going to get into in a second. And the regime provided weapons, passports, and impunity for these people to operate in Venezuela to send drugs to the United States by design. So that actually happened right around here. Yeah, well, look at what happened to overdoses. If you look closely, you might be able to see a trend that would confirm that Venezuela was actually engaging in actual narco-terrorism targeting the United States. The Venezuelan government even gave them territory in Venezuela. Right here, for example, which is right in the key area between Venezuela and Colombia. And again, the media, man, this is CNN reporting. They knew that Hezbollah had operations in Venezuela. In fact, there was a city in Syria called Little Venezuela, where more than 300,000 Venezuelans with dual citizenship coexisted with Russian troops. That's right, Russia is involved. Venezuela was the staging ground for Hezbollah to get involved in Latin America, where they could attempt to indoctrinate people in Chile, Uruguay, and Colombia. And if you don't remember, Hezbollah is basically Iran. So essentially, you have Iranian terrorists operating in Venezuela, running submarines and boats that we don't know what's on those boats. And people in a video I did about this were like, Davis, don't report that these could have been weapons of mass destruction on these boats, but that's what security experts are worried about. And here's one of them. One of our guys in the Coast Guard said, our concern is that they could not only smuggle narcotics, but there's no reason to think they couldn't smuggle something else, like a weapon of mass destruction or a chemical, biological, or radiological weapon. Doesn't sound so crazy when Venezuela is cooperating with Hezbollah and Iran. And it goes deeper. This is just the wildest story. Venezuela has this place called the Isla de Margarita. Apparently it's a really nice place, but basically what they've allowed is this island to become a fortress of illicit finance and a safe harbor for transnational criminals. I'm honestly picturing basically like a pirate island that Venezuela allows to exist. And it is a duty-free zone that makes it the ideal environment for trade-based money laundering. So honestly, all these groups, Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, that don't like the US, they're selling drugs, laundering the money on the pirate island, leading to overdose deaths in America that are every year the equivalent of the entire Vietnam War. But the mainstream media, oh no, these just alleged drug boats. This is just an alleged narco sub. I honestly just don't have time for this that much anymore. And as soon as we start targeting these drug boats, guess what happens to drug prices? They get higher, because the drug routes are disrupted. But it gets crazier, man, because all this seems to have been organized by Cuba. And then they brought in Russia. They gave Russia a base in Venezuela, an island where they could set up their bombers. And then Russia starts selling fighter jets to Venezuela, which Venezuela pays for with the alleged drugs that are coming in on these boats. And then Russia deploys 300 air defense systems, 100 military trainers and technicians, and mercenaries to Venezuela. They even established listening posts capable of intercepting our communications from submarine cables and monitoring our military movements in our own backyard. And I told you, this story is crazy. It gets even crazier. Okay, so there's this company called Smartmatic, and this is the homepage of their website. It's a voting solution that meets America's highest standards for secure, accessible, and transparent elections. Dude, guess who founded Smartmatic? Antonio Mujia, born in Venezuela. And what El Pollo tells us, the former spy chief, is that Smartmatic was born as an electoral tool of the Venezuelan regime, but soon derived into a tool to help the regime stay in power forever. I know this because I placed the head of IT of the National Electoral Council in his position, and he reported directly to me. The Smartmatic system can be altered, and this is a fact. Yeah, so these voting machines were created by the Venezuelan regime, with this dude, the spy chief El Pollo, at the head of the program. And remember when Trump had these false narratives about Tren de Aragua and gang members coming from Venezuela? And even judges are halting deportations because of these false gang ties? Yeah, not what El Pollo says. I was present when decisions were made to organize and weaponize criminal gangs across Venezuela to protect the regime. That we recruited criminal leaders. And this was coordinated through the Ministry of the Interior, Ministry of Prisons, National Guard, and National Police Forces. When the Biden-Harris open border policy became widely known, they seized the opportunity. Yet here we go, mainstream media. Experts and journalists find no evidence that this is happening. Yeah, no evidence, like not the arrest of the high-ranking Tren de Aragua gang member that was running a gang ring out of Tennessee, a transnational criminal enterprise. What was happening was this concept of La Guerra de todo el pueblo. You can see these headlines that all talk about this. It was coming out of Cuba and Venezuela. They aligned with Iran, they aligned with Russia to basically coordinate a dedicated effort to destabilize the United States through targeted drug exports, targeting gangs, to be recruited through official national channels and then sent in because we had an open border policy, exporting voting machines created by Venezuelans, giving land where Hezbollah could start getting a foothold in Latin America, and also refining cocaine, and even giving Russia a base where they could put bombers in our backyard. So yeah, when Trump is trying to take out the drug boats, it has global implications.